People made a big thing about it. One time your dad was like, "Oh, it's like my dream to play with my son." But I don't know if anybody had ever asked you, did you ever dream about playing with your dad, for you, or what went to it from your perspective?
No, never. My dream has always just been to put my name out, make a name for myself, and of course, get to the NBA, which is everyone's end goal is here. And I never thought about just playing with my dad, but he's brought it up a couple times. But yeah, I don't think about it much.
The Dallas Mavericks apparently love Bronny James. What it actually means and why there's a larger discussion to be had when it comes to GM Nico Harrison in light of the Mavericks making the NBA Finals. This is Inside the Mavs. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel here as well by hitting that subscribe button. And also, you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Didn't think I was going to be talking about Bronny James and the Dallas Mavericks in this fashion and manner a week ahead of the NBA draft. But yet here we are, because reports are that the Dallas Mavericks, according to his agent Rich Paul, love Bronny James. Now, there's so much to get into the reports of Jonathan Givony of ESPN, where Rich Paul had a chance to sit down and talk with Givony ahead of the NBA draft, and allowed us to have some pretty interesting information with respect to Bronny James, the son, of course, of the all-time leading scorer in NBA history and 4-time NBA champion LeBron James. Bronny James, who had a 40.5-inch vertical, measures at 6'1", averaged 5 points, 3 rebounds, and a couple assists at USC while shooting 37% from the field and just 26% from three, has a chance to be projected to be a second-round pick. Now, the Los Angeles Lakers, who own the 17th and 55th overall picks, will probably and have a chance to draft Bronny first. But the Dallas Mavericks, who have the last pick in the NBA draft this year at number 58, apparently are a team that, according to Rich Paul, loves Bronny James. In fact, Rich Paul telling Jonathan Givony in ESPN, quote, "There are other teams that love Bronny. For example, Minnesota, Dallas, and Toronto. If not the Lakers, it will be someone else. Minnesota will love to get Bronny in, but I don't know who the owner is going to be. Mavericks general manager Nico Harrison is like an uncle to Bronny. If the Lakers don't take him at 55, Dallas would take him at 58 and give him a guaranteed deal," end quote. Now, there's a lot to take in there based on what Rich Paul is saying, because LeBron James' son, Bronny, has only worked out for the Lakers and the Suns at this point, and there doesn't appear to be any other workout schedule for Bronny ahead of the NBA draft. But let's focus in on what Paul obviously said when it came to GM Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks. Number one, that the Mavericks love the idea of Bronny James. Now, again, Bronny goes 6'1", can shoot a little bit, doesn't have a great three-pointer, but good basketball IQ, an athletic defender that can continue to grow into his offensive game, where he has limited offensive skills, but can shoot the ball with some inconsistency at times from the three-point line. And with the Mavericks, the idea being that they need some athletic defense and a guy that can shoot. Now, again, let's not get over our skis here when it comes to Bronny James. There would be a lot of development that would need to take place for James to even be a serious contributor for a Dallas Mavericks team who just made the NBA Finals. But the intrigue here lies in the idea that the relationship that Nico Harrison has with LeBron James and his son Bronny considering him like an uncle-like figure is very, very interesting to me. And I think the larger discussion here, let's think about it in the context of what the Mavericks have just achieved here. They went to the NBA Finals. They saw their superstar in Luka Doncic ascend to arguably the best player in the world this past season as an NBA scoring champion. They have Kyrie Irving there, who is there in large part because of the relationship that Nico Harrison and obviously Jason Kidd had with Irving, and he being able to be comfortable in the environment that Dallas presented with the infrastructure built in large part by Nico Harrison, the president of basketball operations and the general manager there. And Harrison being declared the guy who's running the show, Mark Cuban, not the one running the operations for the Mavericks. It is Nico Harrison's show. It just shows you how deeply connected Nico is to the entirety of the league that we were even having this discussion. And I think that is the point, that if you're going to take anything away from the idea of Bronny James, aside from the player himself and the development that he still has to do as a prospect to eventually be a contributor to an NBA team, it's the idea that with the success that the Mavericks have had and the fact that Nico Harrison is running this team, he puts you in play for pretty much everyone in the league. And that should bode well if the Mavericks can use some creative and interesting roster management and gymnastics to be able to improve this roster going forward, where they've got decisions to make when it comes to guys, namely in Derrick Jones Jr. If you see the article in The Ringer by Kevin O'Connor, he has his quote-unquote dream fits for different teams for certain players around the league, Jeremy Grant being the quote-unquote dream fit for the Dallas Mavericks. I bring that up because, again, when you're looking at the correct and potential roster construction that the Mavericks have to do to elevate their ceiling that much more to win a championship and not just get back to the NBA Finals, it's going to take some maneuvering on Nico Harrison, Andrew Baker, Michael Finley, and this entire Mavericks front office to be able to pull it off. But the idea that we're talking about LeBron James' son, Bronny, should give you an indication of the standing that the Mavericks have in the league relative to who's running their team and the success that they're now having, that they are one of the teams that is being, quote unquote, in when it comes to Bronny James, and the fact that they love the idea that James is there. And if you're going to trust this team from a roster development standpoint, they found you Derrick Jones Jr. They found you a guy in Dante Exum. They were able to turn P.J. Washington and get him from the Charlotte Hornets. They got Daniel Gafford from the Washington Wizards. This team, in a lot of ways, under the leadership and direction of Nico Harrison, have put themselves in this position. So if you're going to trust the idea that Nico's going to be continuing to run the show here, this is a really interesting piece of news relative to not just the player and the prospect and what it means for LeBron James, which we'll get into, but more importantly, what it means for the Mavericks. That, to me, is what we need to focus in on based on what we're learning when it comes to Bronny James and his draft prospects, particularly the fact that the Mavericks love him as a potential player and also would, quote unquote, guarantee him a deal, which could be some posturing, obviously, by Rich Paul. Don't let that go by the wayside here. More on this when it comes to this fascinating piece of news when it comes to Bronny James and what it actually means for the Dallas Mavericks, Nico Harrison, and this front office. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, But not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, thank you for hanging out with us through our spot, and thank you to today's sponsor, our video and our podcast, in Aura. With the news that Bronny James apparently is loved by the Dallas Mavericks, according to his agent, Rich Paul, and I already see y'all jumping in on my timeline saying, yeah, we don't want necessarily a borderline G leaguer who would be a distraction all year for the Mavericks, and to which I say, look, I understand the idea that you may feel like the Lakers are going to take Bronny at number 55, or someone may take him earlier than what the Mavericks would be able to by the time we get to the final pick of the draft when they have the number 58 overall pick. But at the same time, what's intriguing here is that now you have a prospect connected to arguably, for some, the greatest player in the world when it comes to LeBron James. And most importantly, when you have the opportunity to be connected to that player, I'm not saying that LeBron James is coming to the Mavericks. The Mavericks don't have the necessary and requisite room to even bring or contemplate bringing LeBron James here. So let's get that very clear here. This is not a thing to where the Mavericks feel like they would need to draft Bronny to somehow acquire LeBron James. That's not happening. In fact, I don't think it matters to LeBron James that the Lakers draft LeBron James' son, because I think he's staying with Los Angeles regardless if Bronny is there or not. And part of Gavoni's report is that LeBron James isn't married to the idea that he has to play with his son. And you heard at the beginning of our show that Bronny James isn't necessarily married to the idea that he wants to play or has to play with his dad either. So I don't see this piece of news as a sign that we're connecting the idea that the Mavericks are trying to angle to potentially get Bronny James in order to bring LeBron James to Dallas. I don't think LeBron James is going anywhere and is going to stay in Los Angeles. I do wonder, though, if you're JJ Redick and you do take that job in Los Angeles with the Lakers and they do take Bronny James and they're there with LeBron James as well, that kind of circus that you're going to be dealing with all year long, especially with the lofty expectations with LeBron James and Anthony Davis still there for a first-year head coach and JJ Redick trying to manage all that. I don't know if I would want that headache if I'm Redick, and I should just take that money that I'm making on TV, especially having called my first ever NBA Finals. But that's another conversation for the Lakers to have. But this, again, is more about the Dallas Mavericks and what they've built in terms of their culture and their front office, led by Nico Harrison, that should attract a number of different players to feel like they may be a piece that helps the Mavericks get over the top. And that, to me, is the overarching idea and discussion here, is that the Mavericks are now seen in a light by teams around the league and by players as a legitimate NBA Finals contender, having already made the NBA Finals with a top 5 player in Luka Doncic and a superstar sidekick in Kyrie Irving, who has been there, done that, and been an NBA champion, and what the Mavericks could utilize in order to get over the top to win a championship. That is the foundation that Nico Harrison has built here. And when you've got a young core that includes a PJ Washington, a Daniel Gafford, a Derek Lively II to go along with Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, you have the foundation of a team that's going to be a contender for several years to come, even in a stacked West when it comes to the Nuggets and the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Memphis Grizzlies, and other teams that you want to put in that conversation as legitimate NBA Finals contenders, but specifically coming out of the West. But for this to come out a week before the NBA draft, and again, is it some smoke screening potentially by Rich Paul in order to make sure that he's drumming up that much more interest in Bronny and potentially getting him drafted a little bit higher? Of course it may be. And I'm not saying that the Mavericks aren't necessarily maybe being used as a pawn in the game of Bronny James to increase his draft stock here. That is definitely on the table as well, because we know when we get to draft season, whether it's the NBA or the NFL or otherwise, it's lying season. And there may be a lot of pieces of information that are put out there that may drum up interest in a prospect that may not necessarily be there. So the Mavericks could be falling victim to that. But if we are to believe what we are reading and hearing, the Mavericks are legitimately interested in Bronny James. And we've heard that throughout the course as we get closer to draft season about the Mavericks' potential interest in drafting Bronny. But at the same time, all I know is that way as I feel now about this front office, based on the moves that they made, whether it be to get off Kristaps Porzingis, obviously to be able to bring in Kyrie Irving by moving Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, the team has made shrewd moves that have fit the identity of what the Mavericks were looking for on the defensive end, and they've got to find some more shooting going into next season to increase their ceiling that much more. But players talk around the league, and when they see information like this being connected to one of the greatest players in the history of the game and his son, who has a chance to be an NBA player, no matter how you may feel about him as a prospect, that will carry throughout the course of the league, and the Mavericks will be in those discussions. And now they have a legitimate seat at the table when it comes to the discussions around the league about how they may be able to acquire certain players and the maneuvering that they will be able to do to be able to make that happen. That, to me, is a large part of why I find this so fascinating when it comes to LeBron, Bronny, and the Lakers and everything else that has to do with Bronny James and this information here. So if you're a Mavericks fan, take it in, because all of this discussion where you feel like there's some dream fits out there with a Jeremy Grant or other players like Malcolm Brogdon or whoever you may feel needs to come in to help this team get to an NBA championship and actually win it, those conversations will be taking place over the next several days and weeks as we get closer to NBA free agency. But damn it, when the NBA news moves fast. We just finished the NBA finals, and now all of a sudden we're talking about, of course, the NBA draft and NBA free agency happening here at the end of the month. We've already seen a deal be announced for the Indiana Pacers in terms of retaining Pascal Siakam, who will make that official when the moratorium ends in early July, on July the 6th. But again, this shows you where we are, and most importantly, the discussion that the Mavericks are now in, and you will hear this more and more and more over the coming days, weeks, months, and years, because now they have seen themselves make an NBA Finals and are legitimately seen as a team that will contend for years to come with a superstar and a superstar sidekick in terms of Kyrie Irving, who is his Robin to the Batman that is Luka Doncic. But my goodness, again, I didn't think you and I would be having a discussion about Bronny James. Now, no matter how you may feel about him as a prospect, whether he can help or is a borderline G leaguer, however you may feel the hell about Bronny James, feel that. But take a look at the bigger picture here when it comes to what it means for Nico Harrison and this front office and for Dallas itself, and the mind that people have toward this organization as it relates to how they compete on the floor and what players may feel about their chances to come here to be a missing piece or link to help this team win a championship. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what I want you to focus in on when you hear especially something like this. Smoke screen or not, it's something to take interesting seriousness in because of what it means for the bigger picture for this Mavericks front office or organization, not just now, but down the line as well. But we'll see what happens when we get to the NBA draft a week or so from now, what Bronny James will do and how, if he will be drafted by the Lakers or the Suns or someone else to potentially be a part of their roster, or intrigue. Let's just walk down this road real quick before we end today. What if Bronny James does get to 58 and is there with the Dallas Mavericks? If we're talking about a guaranteed deal, quote unquote, that Rich Paul is talking about, if you're the Mavericks, why not take the flyer on Bronny James? You've got the last overall pick in the draft. You might as well make it happen. And here's the thing. If you're worried about the Mavericks having to deal with what comes with drafting a Bronny James, this is an organization that has built a structure and a culture around it to withstand having Kyrie Irving on it. And if you believe that that organization has been able to successfully navigate the Kyrie Irving experience the way that they have so far, I think they're well equipped to be able to handle what may come with Bronny James being part of this organization as well. And let me tell you something, Summer League will be hella interesting as well when it comes to Bronny James and the experience for the Mavericks. But don't take that for granted. If the Mavericks have been able to put together a team, a culture, and an organization that can withstand with having Kyrie Irving on this team and build that around him to successfully navigate to an NBA Finals, yeah, I have confidence that they can handle the Bronny James experience, even with all the exterior noise that comes with having him potentially on your team. Just something to think about when it comes to this whole Bronny James thing with the Mavericks. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Thank you for joining me here on this episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating. Write a review for it while you're there. And if you watch this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. I am, of course, your Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network and host of Inside the Mavs. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.